What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and welcome to a new ongoing series where I'm going to be breaking down the core rules of Warhammer 40k 10th edition. We have the entirety of the rulebook now, so we can go into the individual sections and break them down, and that's what this series is going to be. So, if you enjoy, please drop a like on the video, subscribe on the channel, and let me know down in the comment section what section you would like me to cover next. Today, we're going to be starting with the first thing that you do in every turn of 40k 10th edition that you're going to play, your command phase. The effects that trigger in the command phase, the sequence that it occurs at, and most importantly, the battle shock effect, which is a brand new mechanic and entirely replaces all of the morale mechanics that we saw in previous editions. So let's dive into it. Now, according to the rulebook, the command phase is split into two sections, the command step and the battle shock step. But really, there are also two additional ones that are kind of secret. First off, anything that triggers at the start of your command phase is going to take place. Just like in 9th edition, at this stage, both players are going to get 1 command point. This means over the course of the game, while you don't start with any command points as normal in 10th edition, both players are going to get 10 to play with, because they're each going to get 2 per battle round. You have to remember that you can still only regenerate 1 command point per battle round. That includes both your turn and your opponent's turn. So if you have things that regenerate CP when you spend command points or gain UCP when you do particular actions, only one of those can trigger each turn. However, that is not the case for effects that make stratagems free. That doesn't actually gain you new command points, it just lets you do stratagems for not spending command points. Now, in the command step of the command phase, you're going to resolve any other effects that trigger generically in the command phase. So a good example of this would be like Tyrannid's Shadow in the Warp. That's an effect that is activated by the Tyrannid player once per game in either player's command phase, but because it doesn't specify what step of the command phase it happens in, it automatically happens in the command step. There's a lot of effects like this in the game, and this is where a lot of support and buff effects are implemented. You're going to turn them on or target them in this stage of the command phase. Once that is done, we'll go to the battle shock step. At this point, you take a look at each unit from your army that is below half strength. Your starting strength is defined as the number of models in your unit at the beginning of the game. However, if you're a 1 model unit like a monster or vehicle, for example, in order to determine whether you're below half your starting strength and then susceptible to battle shock, you actually will use your number of wounds you begin the game with rather than the number of models in your unit. So in any case, if you've lost more than half of your original models or half of your initial number of wounds, then you're going to be below half strength and eligible to battle shock. Now, importantly, this determination is below half strength, not at it. So, for example, if you have a 10 model unit, you'll have to lose 6 models to be below half your starting numbers. So in order to be eligible to be battle shocked, you specifically have to be below that level. If your unit has a character attached to it, that character just adds its model count to your starting strength. So for example, a 10 model unit that's adding a character unit with 2 models in it to its number will have a starting strength of 12. In order to be below half strength, it's going to have to lose 7 models, since if it only lost 6 at that point, it would be at half strength. 1 more would put it below. During the battle shock step of the command phase, your units that are below half strength are going to start taking those tests, and in order to take a test, it is essentially a leadership check. In the 10th edition of the game, a leadership check is a 2d6 roll that is then compared to your leadership value. You succeed the check if you equal or exceed the leadership value of whatever plus that's on your data sheet. As we've seen, most of the leadership values in the game are 6, 7, or 8. Those numbers on a 2d6 roll are what you need to meet or beat in order to pass the check. As a little bit of math there, this leadership value is effective on a bell curve because it's a 2d6 roll, so an 8 plus leadership, which is extremely bad, on a 2d6 roll gives you about a 40% chance to succeed. However, 7 being the most common number makes it pretty dramatic, so if you have a 7 plus, it actually gives you somewhere close to 59, just about. If you have a very good leadership value like 6 plus, you're actually going to be succeeding that about 70% of the time. And we have seen 5s and 4s elsewhere in the game so far, which are going to be even more likely to succeed their leadership checks. If you fail your leadership check in the battle shock step, then you become battle shocked. This imposes a ton of debuffs to you. First off, your objective control characteristic becomes 0. This makes it functionally impossible for a unit to control an objective, because in order to control an objective, your total of your objective control value of all of your units within 3 inches of that objective has to be greater than your opponent's. And if all of your objective control values are 0 and your opponent doesn't have any models there, then you're both at 0 and the objective is considered to be contested, so no one controls it. In addition, you have to take a desperate escape check to fall back for every model in the unit. Normally, this is a check that is only taken if you move over enemies while you are falling back. However, if you're battle shocked, every model in the unit has to do it regardless of where they're moving to or who they're moving over. When you take a desperate escape check for a unit, you roll 1d6 for each model in the unit that's taking the check, and on a 1 or a 2, one model of your choice is destroyed in the unit. It's not a mortal wound, that model is just cut down by enemies as it tries to escape. Importantly, because you get to choose who is taking the damage, you can elect to take it on models that either did not fail their desperate escape check or that didn't need to. So you can take it on your least effective models in your unit instead of having to take it on characters or unit champions, for example. Last but certainly not least, probably the most damaging effect of Battle Shock is that you cannot be targeted by stratagems. Specifically, stratagems used by their unit's controlling player. So your opponent is perfectly free to debuff you with stratagems, but you are not free to defend yourself. This is going to be huge in the fight phase, since it removes a lot of the interaction in the fight phase. The counter-offensive stratagem that allows you to interrupt in the fight phase and heroic intervention that allows you to interrupt in your opponent's charge phase are both ineligible to be used on a unit that is battle shocked. Now, this battle shock effect is pretty damaging, but it only lasts until the start of your next command phase. So that is the kind of weird sub-timing that we talked about previously. This means that any command phase stratagems that aren't used after the battle shock step are still eligible to be used on a unit that was battle shocked previously. And importantly, this affects any instance of battle shock unless it specifies a specific timing. I think the only example of that right now we have is Rad Bombardment from the Adeptus Mechanicus detachment. So if you are battle shocked in your opponent's turn, once the turn ticks over to yours, immediately at the start of your command phase, that battle shock is going to wear off. If your unit's below half strength, you're going to get to go through your command step, then be forced to take a battle shock check afterwards. This means that battle shocking units during your turn with things like the new Space Marine Infernus Squadron is actually not that useful, but it is very good at preventing them from using defensive stratagems or mucking with you with stratagems. It doesn't really affect their scoring or ability to hold objectives, at least for the time being, but what it does do is prevent that stratagem interaction. It's also important to note that Battle Shock only consecutively triggers if you remain under that below half strength level. So if you regenerate models to the unit or you're Battle Shocked from some other means and haven't taken any casualties, you actually don't have to retest for Battle Shock. Once it wears off, it's done and you don't have to worry about it anymore until you maybe take casualties in the future. After the Battle Shock step of the command phase, we get to our second sort of secret sub-step of the command phase, and that is the end of the command phase. Anything that triggers at the end of your command phase now triggers. So while things that trigger generically within the command phase happen specifically during the command step, things that happen at the end of the command phase happen after the Battle Shock step. At the end of the command phase is also when scoring occurs. Now, we don't have the entire framework of the mission deck system that 10th edition is using, but we do have at least one of the primary objective scoring methods, and we have the open war system, which also uses this scoring timing. Importantly, this means that you'll have to check for Battle Shock before you score any points, meaning that one way your opponent can prevent you from scoring points is knocking your units below that half strength. If they do so, you're going to have to go through your command phase, check for your Battle Shock. If you fail Battle Shock, that unit is not going to be controlling whatever objective it's on. So, if you have backline units, for example, that have taken a couple casualties and are below half strength, there's a pretty decent chance that if they're the only thing sitting on an objective, you may lose control of that objective. And that's one of the reasons that Battle Shock is going to be so important in 10th edition. Understanding the mechanic and controlling it is going to be super important. Now, we do have at least one way to interact with Battle Shock, and that being the insane bravery stratagem. This allows you to automatically pass a failed Battle Shock check. However, it only comes into play when you fail a Battle Shock check during the Battle Shock step of your command phase. So it cannot be used for Battle Shock tests that happen at any other point in the turn, including earlier in the command phase. So that example we gave earlier of the Tyrannid Shadow in the Warp, which happens during the command step of the command phase, you cannot use it because while it is a Battle Shock test in your command phase, it's not in the Battle Shock step of the phase. Try saying that 10 times fast. That one got away from me a little bit. So basically that stratagem is functionally only usable on units that are taking a test because they're below half of their starting strength. So they're going to be taking the normal test that's mandated by the Battle Shock section. Now, once you're finished with all those Battle Shock tests, you go to the end of the command phase and you move on to your movement phase. So that's all we have to talk about for Command Phase and Battle Shock. Let me know down in the comment section what phase you'd like me to cover next, and if you enjoyed this nitty-gritty breakdown of 10th edition's mechanics. Big thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks as well to everybody who supports the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. All you people are awesome, and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.